I want to take this opportunity to talk about exactly what it means for you. First, if you're one of the more than 250 million Americans who already have health insurance, you will keep your health insurance. This law will only make it more secure and more affordable. Insurance companies can no longer impose lifetime limits on the amount of care you receive. They can no longer discriminate against children with pre-existing conditions. They can no longer drop your coverage if you get sick. They can no longer jack up your premiums without reason. They are required to provide free preventive care like checkups and mammograms. By this August, nearly 13 million of you will receive a rebate from your insurance company because it spent too much on things like administrative costs and CEO bonuses and not enough on your health care. Because of the Affordable Care Act, young adults under the age of 26 are able to stay on their parents' health care plans, a provision that's already helped 6 million young Americans. All of this is happening because of the Affordable Care Act.
That was the president today offering his clearest and simplest explanation ever of what is in the Affordable Care Act. But the Supreme Court made one significant change to the Affordable Care Act that the president did not mention. As important as the individual mandate is to the bill, the Medicaid provision is actually more important to coverage. The Medicaid provision provides health care coverage to millions more people than any other provision in the bill. Of the 30 million people the Congressional Budget Office estimated would get the coverage from the bill, 17 million were going to get it from the expansion of Medicaid, which the Supreme Court has now said is optional for the states, not mandatory. 26 states went to the Supreme Court saying, we don't want the Medicaid provision. So a majority of the states now might not adopt the Medicaid provision, and the Congressional Budget Office estimate of the 17 million who would be covered will surely now have to be revised to a lower figure. With all the Democratic Party celebration for the constitutionality of the individual mandate today, virtually no one has noticed how much health care coverage might have been lost today as a result of the Supreme Court decision. But one former Democratic governor who understands the decision and had to administer Medicaid in his state is worried tonight.
I'm a little nervous about the Medicaid ruling because Medicaid is actually insured more people in this bill than anything else.
Joining me now to analyze the newest provision of the Affordable Care Act as written by the United States Supreme Court, former Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell, an MSNBC contributor, Christine Ferguson, the former Massachusetts Public Health Commissioner and the newly appointed director of Rhode Island's Health Benefits Exchange. She's also a professor at George Washington University, and Crystal Ball, a Democratic strategist and the co-host of MSNBC's new 3 p.m. show, The Cycle. Okay, Governor, you're up. This is now optional, this expansion of Medicaid. And so in your state of Pennsylvania, which was one of the states that went to the Supreme Court saying we don't want it, it would cost about another $1 billion in Medicaid to the state of Pennsylvania just over the first 6 years of its implementation. That's a state with a Republican governor, a Republican legislature that would have to vote now to accept this new provision and spend more on Medicaid. What are the odds of those Republicans in Pennsylvania saying, okay, yeah, well, the Supreme Court ruled in our favor, we don't have to take it, but now we will?
Well, I have a better chance tomorrow of being able to comb my hair in a pompadour than that. It's not going to happen, and that's one of the real weaknesses of the Supreme Court opinion. It can be fixed by the Congress, but with the Republicans controlling the House, that's not going to happen either. And it's really a sin because Medicaid works. It has a lower administrative cost than virtually any health care provider in the country, and it was a great way to extend coverage. By the way, Lawrence, I agree with you. Had the president made this speech on the Affordable Health Care Act at the beginning when he sent it to the Congress, I don't think we would have had half the problems we've had.
The key was how short it was. You got to keep it short. It doesn't sound complicated when you do that.
Boom, boom, boom.
Right. Christine Ferguson, I wanted you to join us tonight for a bunch of reasons, including to take a bow, since you are the actual author of the individual mandate in our politics. You wrote the Republican bill for Senator John Chafee back in 1993, which was the very first authorship of the individual mandate in legislative language. And back then, I was working on the other side of the aisle, but we talked about it a lot. And I always just assumed, and I think we all did, that the constitutional justification for it was in the power to tax. I don't remember you guys suggesting it was in the Commerce Clause.
Never suggested it was in the Commerce Clause. It was in the power to tax. Absolutely.
And Christine, with your experience on the Republican side of the aisle and in the state administration of Medicaid, you worked for Governor Romney in Massachusetts on health care. What do you think is going to happen now that this Medicaid expansion provision is optional? It covers, in the original version of the bill, 17 million people. It covers most of the people who pick up coverage. What do you think is going to happen?
I think it's going to be very challenging for the 26 states that went to the court to just say, no, we're not going to take 100% federal funds to provide coverage to our citizens. I think that's going to be a tough sell at the end of the day, and I think that there'll be many fewer states that won't take advantage of the option.
Crystal ball, Christine makes the point that it is free money for a while, but then the window closes and the states have to pay 10%. Just for example, some of the costs, even in blue states where you think they would sign up for this, California, it'll cost California $2 billion additional dollars in the first 6 years. That's even considering the free money part of it. It averages out to a total addition of $2 billion. Now, I'm in the state of California right now where I can report to you that one of the considerations for the budget crunch here is to cut the number of public school days by 20 down to 160 days in order to balance the budget here. What are the odds that in a state like California, when they're struggling with education costs like that and all the other costs, that they're going to say, okay, let's add to our Medicaid costs?
Well, you do have to keep in mind that whether they go with the federal government's program of Medicaid expansion or not, they're still going to have a lot of poor people in the state who are going to require some sort of health care. So I think the costs, in a way, have been exaggerated. But I share your concern. I don't think that all of these 26 states that went to court over this will ultimately say we're not going to participate. But places like Texas, where in that state alone you have 1.8 million people who would be impacted by this expansion of Medicaid. I mean, to me, when you look at the fact that Texas has already severed their relationship with the federal government over another Medicaid program providing preventative health care to women over a sort of dispute with Planned Parenthood, and the fact that Rick Perry turned down $500 million in federal stimulus money, this is catnip for a Republican politician trying to gin up their base to say, look, I stuck it to the federal government. I didn't take that Obamacare money. So I share that concern. I don't think that every state will turn it down, but I do think we will see some red states that definitely decide not to go with it.
Ed Rendell,
but I also think...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also think that you've got to remember that there's a period of time during which there will be states that start really implementing the entire Health Care Reform Act. And some of those savings are going to accrue and be important parts of the municipality crisis with the pensions. There's a whole bunch of aspects of this that people aren't talking about right now that have the impact, the possibility of really helping states and state budgets. And I think at the end of the day, states are a whole lot more practical than the federal government. And when it comes down to running those numbers and they see what other places have been able to do, I think you're going to see more states than not really try to pursue this. And
Lawrence,
I just want our audience to know that this show has had no higher authority on this subject on the show than Christine Ferguson, a much higher authority even than me. And Christine, with your experience working in the federal level with Republicans and in the state level with Republicans, I'm taking very seriously the optimism you're giving us tonight that a lot of this Medicaid expansion will occur. But Ed Rendell, I want to talk to you about the pure politics, the pure ambition politics of it. You're a Republican governor. You want to be president. You want to be considered in the future on a presidential ticket, vice president or president. Can you dare to implement any of the Affordable Care Act, including, meaning the part that's optional to you. Some of it you're going to have to implement that's mandatory. But would you implement any of it that's optional? Could you possibly go into primaries in a Republican presidential campaigns in the future saying, oh, one of the things I did was implement part of that Obamacare thing?
Well, I think you're right, Lawrence. I don't think any Republican governor that's got any future ambitions is going to accept the Medicaid money, because it's going to mean down the road spending more state dollars. Although there are offsets to those, putting those people on health care saves the state a lot of money, too. It's not quite as clear. But I agree with you. But however, on the exchanges, the states have the option to let the federal government come in and run their exchanges. I'd be interested in what Christine thinks, but I don't think any Republican governors, or very few, are going to turn those exchanges over to the federal government.
Christine, quickly on the exchanges.
I totally agree with you on that. I think a lot of people who've talked about states just allowing this to go to federal exchange. I can't imagine a governor that I've ever worked with or known that would actually allow that to happen.
And Christine, you're going to set up the exchange in Rhode Island, aren't you?
I am.
Okay. Ed Rendell, crystal ball, and my friend and healthcare teacher and tutor, Christine Ferguson. Thank you all very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.